Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to Build. I'm your host, Chantal Rochelle, and I'm joined by multi-hyphenate artist known for her work in television, film, dance, music, and digital content. Her career began at 6 years old as a dynamic dancer in music videos for various Billboard charting toppers, including Missy Elliott's Work It. You know her, you love her. Please join me in welcoming Alyson Stoner. Welcome.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
How are you?
I'm doing well.
First and foremost, can we get into the shoes? Can we get into the boots?
Aren't they
These
fun?
are fantastic. I love
Some
this.
denim, keeping the flavor going.
Absolutely. And was this not your first New York Fashion Week?
It is my first New York Fashion
How's it
Week.
going so far?
We try to fit as many stops as we can every day. That means like 30 plus outfit changes.
Oh, really?
Yes, but I have my team here and I feel supported, excited.
How's it
really lovely.
How's it been so far? What's been your favorite show?
You know, I was at Philip Lim's presentation, and I will say it's important to notice what kind of audience each designer curates, right? So you can feel the essence and ethos of the brand and the fashion and the style by who shows up. And I felt the most connection and the most kind of resonance with real humans in Philip Lim's show. So I'm excited.
That's beautiful. So do you try to cater your outfits to each show you're going to? Like, okay, I'm going to this show. I got to make sure I'm in the zone.
Yes, but you know, I also leave that to the professionals. I let them figure out what to wear and when and how to rock it. And I'm like, okay, I'll be me, you do you, and then together we can make magic.
Well, it looks amazing.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, let's jump right into your podcast, Simplexity.
Yes.
I'm a huge fan. I just listened to the most recent episode, Healing Your Inner Child.
Yes.
And it was so moving. So I love the intention and the way that you approach your subject. So I want to ask, you talk about your podcast being a way to simplify the complexities of life and add a little curiosity and contemplation to meaningful, sometimes difficult conversations.
Yes.
So how did this podcast come to life and what drew you to reach people on that platform?
Sure. So a few things. There's always been this intellectual side that I haven't brought forward in my work. I've worked with Disney and a lot of large companies, but you often get pigeonholed for the roles you play, right? So there's more to all of us that people don't get to see. So the podcast offers this opportunity to have long-form conversations with experts from across sectors, across disciplines, across generations. And they do simplify what they do for a living for us. So we don't have to be the NASA rocket scientists, but we can still understand how plasma waves helped solve a traffic pattern in this country. And by the end, you're like, oh, okay, I get it. I can walk into a room and hold my own in a conversation, even if I didn't know anything, 30 minutes ago about it. And for me, I think I've always had that spark, that curiosity, that eagerness to learn. But when I look at just society and the conversations that we need to have right now, everything has to take place in this middle ground. We are not speaking to each other. We're not hearing each other. And so the concept is to seek to understand before expecting to be understood. And in so doing, it's bridged this gap where I have folks from everywhere listening and tuning in, and they probably would have never had a conversation with each other except for this conversation has brought us together to be able to learn and kind of close that polarity that we're seeing everywhere.
Absolutely. And I was listening to a few episodes, and it really seems like you take time to research and put intention to every topic you touch on, from financial literacy, which I was like, check, need this, to healing your inner child, to also finding your inner voice. I love that you interviewed India Carney, one of my favorite vocalists.
Isn't she amazing?
I love her. She's fantastic.
Check out
Make sure
India
you listen to the episode. India Carney is fantastic.
Yes.
But I love that it seemed like you make sure that there's intention. So how do you think about the topics you talk about and the people that you want to reach out to make sure those topics come to life?
Yes, anything that intrigues me or feels like it needs to be debunked, I add it to a list. I have about 50 to 75 topics waiting to be researched right now. We have a Singaporean historian coming on soon. We had a Senegalese technologist who teaches women and girls how to code across the continent of Africa to empower them as well as shift how we perceive Africa and what it offers to the global economy and whatnot. And so there are so many things to learn. There's amazing things happening on the planet, and so many humans are involved in things that I would have never thought of. So what I do is I do my deep dive, and I write every episode myself. We have the intro monologue that welcomes people into the theme, and then we talk with the expert. But at the end, my favorite part is we take the top takeaways and we reformat them into affirmations. So every listener can immediately apply what we just learned instead of listening but not internalizing, right? Because we can hear all day long, but if we don't comprehend and apply it, then we're wasting time. So I'm all about action. So I want that transformation. I want this to be a self-development tool, as well as something that sparks your own curiosity.
Absolutely. It sparked my curiosity for sure. What's been
Good.
some of the reception that you've got from fans and listeners to the podcast? It's been
Yeah. So I have people who come from all backgrounds, right? So, for example, I have folks who have really strong religious upbringings, and they're listening to a skeptic or an atheist or someone who focuses more on the science. In their field, and by the end they're opening their minds to seeing things in new languages, right? So instead of just speaking in a faith tradition, they're also able to use the verbiage that you would find from quantum physics, and vice versa. So some people who are skeptics have listened to episodes where we're talking about extrasensory perception, and instead of just talking about it in woo-woo terms, as some people say, we're actually breaking down energetically what's going on scientifically as well, so you don't have to feel like it's too far of a shot. It's not a moonshot. You can actually simplify it the way that the subject of calculus, for example, breaks everything down to the minutia and then rebuilds it one equation formula at a time. I don't know. I didn't take that class. That'll be another episode.
next episode, y'all.
I'm at the basics. We're here to simplify.
I'm right there with you, right there. Simplexity, okay?
Yes.
Now, ALchemy is the visual component to the way that you
Yes.
want to make sure that you're getting your message across. So tell me
Yeah.
about ALchemy and why you wanted to have a visual component to making sure that these stories were told in your
Yes.
respective way.
Yeah, thank you for asking. So ALchemy is my short form digital series on my YouTube channel. And yes, I'm still working on television and different films and projects, but I want my own content to help make education and transformation accessible, affordable, equitable. So first and foremost, it starts with me doing my own work, right? So a lot of self-reflection, a lot of self-education, cultural competency, different things to make sure that if I'm speaking to a diverse group of people, I'm not just using my monocultural, ethnocentric lens, right? But beyond that, then we're simplifying frameworks and tools so people know how to approach the problems right in front of them. We have things like time management, something as simple as the toolkits, honestly, that we all needed in school, but none of the gen ed covered. So this is like, life kits for all of us. And I'm always open to feedback. It's a community conversation, and across my social platforms, we always ask questions, and I hear from everyone, and I'm open to advice and feedback because I'm learning as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of learning, I mentioned a recent episode with Asia George. We were talking about financial literacy,
Yes.
and he mentioned, we wish we had this in school growing up. Why don't we have this type of education?
I
Are there
know.
things that you wish that you had growing up? Like when you talk about financial literacy, I'm like,
Ooh.
I wish I knew how to save better. I wish I knew how to,
Right.
vocalize things better, right? Growing up,
Yes.
you wish that these are things that you learned in school. So
Yeah.
are these tools that you bring to life in a visual component because those are things that you hope to be implemented in the
Absolutely.
school system?
Yeah, I think I'm almost reaching into my past, and I'm seeing where the voids, the gaps are, and what I need to fill in. And then also checking in with my friends and saying, what are the problems that we repeatedly are facing? And we feel like we're stuck, or we have different blocks. How can we overcome these and work through them so that we can move on with life, so that we can fulfill our potential, but also look around and make sure we're making the same equal opportunity for everyone else at the same time? Because we can't afford to not speak to the full human in front of us anymore. We're ready to move beyond that.
That's beautiful. Is there
Yeah.
something that you potentially could see on screen? Because YouTube is easy
Yeah.
accessible. Like you don't have to pay for that, right?
Right.
So people have easy, free education to the
Yeah.
tools that you're placing them with. So are there hopes to potentially have this be on a bigger platform for more people to
course.
digest?
Yeah, so right now I'm developing some courses specifically around a concept that I'm loosely titling mindful movement, because I think right now when we think of working out and fitness and activity, we have a lot of baggage that comes with that. And when we think of dancing, we think you've got to be a professional in order to know how to move your body. But for me, when I think of movement, if we can have this vessel, this earth suit, the only one that we have while we're here, feel like a safe place that we can trust, and that we can work with and not against to get through the world, then by going through some of these movement exercises that are creative and fun and can be healing, experimental, then we can kind of shift how we approach activity, and also move naturally in a way that leads to longevity instead of, feeling like you got to go to the gym and pump iron. And I just want people to feel like they can return home, whether that's intellectually or emotionally, more and more every day. And I think the element that characterizes all of the projects that I want to offer people is wholeness. And of course, social impact. But if we can individually become more and more whole in everything that we do, every way that we treat the person in front of us, then I feel like I'm hopefully using my platform and my privilege wisely. It's a responsibility I didn't really ask for, right? Like, I started working at 6 years old, and I didn't know that I would be sitting here with you today at my first New York Fashion Week, right? I didn't know that I would be on the VMAs a couple months ago. I didn't know that I would be with you, but I'm thankful for it, and I take it seriously. And if I don't,
that intention, making sure there's intention in everything you're doing. Speaking of your upbringing, since you were 6 years old, I grew up watching you, Mike Super Short Show. I was too in front and center, seeing you in Missy Elliott videos. So for you, having this journey, when did your awakening, you'd say, if you will, when you were just like self, mind, body, I need to pay special attention to this. When did that into your life? You're just like, I need to take more care of mind, body, and soul. Because there's a lot of intention in the way that you talk about it on the podcast. And so when did that happen for you? When did that enter your life?
I remember distinctly around age 13, and I'll be fully transparent. At the time, I was really struggling with my health, and my body was shutting down, but I was working, adult hours, maybe even more than the average adult. And so I needed physical and medical treatment, and I realized, obviously, this isn't sustainable. My body's wanting to develop right now, and it's completely stunted, and it's harmful, it's dangerous. And so the extreme environment gave me a forced choice, right? I can go one way or the other. Either I crumble or I find my way through this. And I started therapy really young, and voluntarily. No one was like, uh-oh, this one looks like she's about to go crazy. But I knew that was sort of that preventative medicine, and the nurturing that maybe I didn't yet know how to offer myself. And so much credit goes to the mentors around me. Even my vocal coach was like a life coach. I used to, when he had conversations with people, and they asked, what do you do for a living? He would say, I'm a garbage man. I take out the trash in people's lives.
Wow.
And he did that with me vocally, and he knew everything that I carried, pain, trauma, and the good memories too. Everything showed up during the voice lessons, and he would help me work through it. And so now I feel like he passed the torch to me, and I want to offer that to everyone else.
Oh, that's so beautiful. And with your voice work, you did voiceover work for Phineas and Ferb. That's a huge, passion for you. So how did you implement that, your learnings, into the work that you do with voiceovers, into your future projects? How do you implement that?
Yeah, a lot of it boils down to trusting that. You know what's interesting, as an artist, and I was talking about this yesterday, whenever we encounter actors, you know when someone's an actor, because they feel like they have to be perfectly rehearsed and polished. And if they didn't have a chance to memorize the script, they won't be able to book the role. And the audition room really trains you to try and win people's approval, and to almost have an external locus of control where you can tell me who I am and who I'm not. And so a lot of my healing work has been around learning to bring that control back within this vessel, and to trust when I show up. And for example, I can't say that project. Woo, almost slipped.
Almost gotcha.
Confidential. So I play this really cool role in this really cool thing that'll come out at some time in the future.
Okay.
And I just recorded the things for it, and I had to pretend that I was going through a very painful situation, and it can be kind of a strange environment when you're with people you don't know, and suddenly you're like, all right, now I'm just going to cry and whimper on this microphone. But instead I went, you know what? I'm human. I've been in these kinds of scenarios. So I'm just going to substitute a memory for this one, and I'm going to channel it, and I'm going to let it go, and then I'm going to move on. And when you do it that way, I mean, you can be in any environment, work environment, you have to, take a test. It's like, just show up, do it, and then learn how to let it go. Because that stuff will just fester. Yeah, we don't have time.
We don't have time.
Adulthood also. I'm like,
Absolutely.
No one tells you that you don't have time to do any of all the things that are on your plate. So, like, let it go.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
so when you are approaching your projects like voiceover work, and we recently saw you at the 2019 VMAs, and
Yes,
you're
you
going
did.
back, and you're basically like muscle memory for you, right? You're like, okay, this is home for me.
I
So when you're
guess.
reapproaching that and you're just like, these are my passions, how was that experience like for you, stepping back and learning? Well, you know it's like muscle memory for you, but what was it like
Right.
stepping back into that moment and being,
So two things, because you said muscle memory,
Yeah.
and that's a great point.
Mhm.
But if in the previous experiences your nervous system was overwhelmed and shocked by the adrenaline rush,
Yeah.
like I used to be when I was touring with people or touring my own music, then that kind of anxiety can be triggered as well.
Yeah.
I decided this round that wasn't going to be my approach. And so Missy's team texted me the day before, of all times. I'm like, you could have given me a little more heads up before I'm doing a solo.
Oh, wow. The day before
on
the show?
VMAs. Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
So you had a short like turnaround.
We didn't. I rehearsed once. And I messed up in rehearsal. And I was like, hi-hat, her choreographer, I was like, please just know I'm going to show up for you. You will not regret this. I'm here for the team. Like, I love Missy. And obviously, all credit goes to her, too. It was
Yeah.
her vanguard, not my performance.
Yeah.
But I wanted to make sure I did the most with it. So instead of letting that kind of like hyper-vigilant Alyson kick in from my younger years, I said, okay, I'm going to do this meditation where I look at every one of the crew members who's helped making this show possible. I'm going to look at everyone in the audience. I'm going to look at all the materials that are going into building these sets. I'm going to look at Missy, and I'm going to say, I am you. I am that. We are one. And I'm just playing one role today out of all the roles we're playing to co-create this moment. And that took away so much pressure. There was no hierarchy. There was no illusion of separation between humans anymore. And that freed me to be able to actually, even though my heart was racing right before I went on, I mean, it jumped up, it spiked for sure, but I stayed grounded enough that I can recall that moment forever.
Yeah.
And I couldn't do that in earlier shows. So as much of it as it was an outward celebration that went viral and was amazing, collectively, it also was a moment of internal growth for me to be like, you stayed you. In a moment where you could have really lost yourself, just been swept into the ocean of like, I mean, doing a solo.
Yeah.
Like I also I haven't done those moves in 17 years. You know?
Yeah.
For real, 17 years.
Wow. And so having to step back into that and seeing all these eyes are now on you, right? You know, last time you were in the whirlwind of these things where you're younger, you know, you weren't as, growth, right? You've grown so much since that time, right?
Yeah.
And so when you now have all these eyes looking at you, everyone's like, oh my gosh, Alyson Stoner, you're on Ellen's show.
Yeah.
What was that experience like, stepping back into, oh my gosh, I'm in the spotlight? How did you navigate that newfound, experience?
So two things again. I recognize that I have to reintroduce myself. Even though I've been learning and growing, even though I've, since the Missy video, been on 200 film sets and shows, a lot of people aren't aware of that work. So I have to be patient in the reintroduction process and meet people where they're at. But also, I had mixed feelings, if I'm being totally transparent, because it was Missy's moment. It wasn't mine. And the fact that I had the press on me, I wanted to make sure I received that with gratitude, but also navigated it respectfully, knowing this is about Missy. Like, I'm just the finger pointing to the moon. Missy is the moon, and it's her vanguard, not mine. Thankfully, she was kind enough and humble enough to include me in her performance. So it was delicate, because also the interviews get cut down, and so even if you were trying to give her credit, they just want certain blurbs, and that's okay, it's not in my control. But even as a team, we internally spoke about which opportunities we would and would not take, to make sure that everything led back to gratitude for Missy.
Yeah, and that really shined beautifully. I saw the intention
good.
when you on social media, on Instagram,
Cool.
you're like, "Hey, Missy, right here!
Yeah,
Like
right.
this is who gave me this
Yeah.
job, who gave me this platform." So I
Right.
think it's a beautiful thing that goes show in Simplexity and ALchemy, and you're making sure that you're using your vehicle and your platform for good, and making sure
Yes,
that we're
yes.
knowing about these issues: Earth, the global warming,
Yeah.
climate change. These are all issues that you care about deeply. So you using your
Right.
platform is super beneficial. So how are you going to implement that in your future projects, future work that you step into?
I'm excited to give other people the microphone. I'm really excited that I get to be a listener and I get to take the back seat. Even if I'm holding people's hand, and I might be hosting the show.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to developing projects as a producer, as a creator, director, writer, where I can let other people tell their stories. I've had a microphone for 20 years. I could keep it, and I will use it if and when necessary. And I do enjoy, like, this is a beautiful, thank you for having me. This is a beautiful opportunity, and it's time to widen the net. Like, there are so many people, there's wisdom. Every single person sitting here can teach me something. I recognize that. And I'm not just saying that to be politically correct or nice. Like, if I sit at your feet for 5 minutes, I know that my mind will be blown by what you've been through, what you've survived, and the wisdom that you hold in your body and in your mind. So if we can just continue approaching projects collaboratively instead of hierarchically, I think we can see the shift that inevitably needs to happen, structurally, systematically, in all ways and shapes and forms.
So beautiful. We can listen to you all day, but you can't listen to her all day on Simplexity, y'all. So you can get all this knowledge and wisdom on our podcast. Alyson, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to open up for questions from our audience. So do we have anyone that wants to ask the amazing Alyson Stoner a question?
Hi, Alyson.
Hi.
I loved you in Cheaper by the Dozen and Step Up.
Thanks.
And I wanted to know what it was like working with Steve Martin and the rest of the cast.
Yeah. So Steve is actually a lot more contemplative and kind of serious than you would expect. You see the wild and crazy guy on set, but he's quite introverted, and so he would retreat back to his trailer, and he even had someone who would like prepare his bike for him. He would ride it to set. They would flip it around for him so he could ride it back to his trailer. And he had his dog Roger on set all the time. I don't know if you're familiar, but he's like a Grammy Award-winning banjo player and musician. And so he would bring his banjo, and he taught one of the other young kids, Forrest, who played FedEx, redhead, how to play banjo during the first movie. And then Bonnie Hunt, who played my mom, she to this day is like a mother figure for me. So it was my first movie experience, and I'm really fortunate that it was that one. Having a lot of peers that were relatively close to my age was helpful, because as a kid too, you're in an environment and you have adults who are kind of very imposing and high pressure situations and adult rules and standards. So we were really fortunate. And then we had the sequel too, which was a lot more fun, because then you're like, all right, we got this. Like, we're already a family. Yeah.
That's awesome. Do you still keep in touch with any of the cast members?
I do.
Oh, awesome.
I spoke to Kevin. We've created some projects together, actually. And yeah, I think did I just see Hillary? Yes, we're all in touch randomly.
No, same orbit.
Yeah, there are so many of us.
Yes, there are quite a few.
It's hard to miss. Like you can pick a spot in LA or New York and you'll find a baker. Yeah.
Awesome. Next question over here.
Hi, Alyson.
Hey.
So I was wondering, on your YouTube podcast, have you
Yes.
thought of any other topics that you will be willing to focus on?
Yes. Do you have any recommendations?
I say food, travel.
Food and travel? Okay. Yeah, I'm down for both. We did have Glow. She was talking about entrepreneurship as a travel blogger. So we did talk about some destinations, but absolutely. And my favorite kind of food is Ethiopian food. So maybe I'll go around to some different places and have them break it down. Maybe I'll go into the restaurants too, or actually the homes. That's where the real good food is made. Yeah. I'm open to any suggestions too. So if you're like, this is what I do for a living, no one understands it, like, let me know. Like data, AI, whatever you need.
Yes. Hey, AI. I mean, would not mind an episode about AI.
Yeah, we have a virtual reality one coming up soon.
Nice.
And yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Any more questions in the audience? Awesome. Well,
they're like, no, you've said enough, Professor.
You're like, we're
enough.
good. Oh, you're going to listen to podcasts. Okay, awesome. Well, Alyson, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks.
Make sure you all tune in, listen to Simplexity and ALchemy. Alyson Stoner, thank you so much.
Thanks.